Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have supernatural strength? To be able to tear apart a lion with your bare hands? To bring down an entire building with one final push? What if that same strength became your greatest weakness? This is the story of Samson and Delilah. A tale of extraordinary power, forbidden love, and the ultimate betrayal that changed the course of history. Some say it's just an ancient legend. I say it's a mirror reflecting our deepest struggles. The burden of being different, the danger of misplaced trust, and how one moment of weakness can change everything forever. Stick with me until the end, because Samson's final prayer will leave you breathless. In a small village nestled among the hills of Zorah, a boy was born unlike any other. His mother had been visited by an angel who gave her specific instructions: the child shall be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from birth. No razor shall touch his head. No wine shall pass his lips. No dead thing shall he touch. They named him Samson. From his earliest days, people whispered about him. Not always kindly. "There goes that strange boy," the village baker muttered as young Samson raced through the marketplace, his wild, untamed hair flowing behind him like a banner. "Did you see how much bread he ate? It's not natural," the butcher's wife would gossip behind her hand. "Keep your daughters away from him," warned the old women. "He's not like other boys." And they were right. Samson wasn't like other boys. While other children struggled to carry small jugs of water, Samson effortlessly lifted massive stones. While other boys his age played with wooden toys, Samson uprooted small trees for fun. His mother would sit with him at night, running her fingers through his growing locks of hair that had never known the touch of scissors. "You are special, my son," she would whisper. "God has chosen you for something important. Something bigger than all of us." But being special is hard when you're young. When all you want is to fit in. The village children kept their distance, watching from afar as Samson played alone, inventing games that only he could win. Except for one boy, Amir, who dared to be Samson's friend. "Race you to the big oak." Amir would challenge, knowing full well he'd lose but laughing anyway when Samson would reach the tree before Amir had barely begun running. One day, as the two boys wandered near the vineyards that bordered Philistine territory, they encountered something unexpected: a young lion, separated from its pride, hungry and angry. Amir froze in terror. The lion's eyes locked onto the boys, its muscles tensing to pounce. But before Amir could even scream, something extraordinary happened. Samson stepped forward, his eyes flashing with sudden power. "Run, Amir!" Samson shouted. Amir scrambled away, climbing up the nearest tree. From his perch, he witnessed something impossible. 15-year-old Samson faced the charging lion with nothing but his bare hands. As the beast leaped toward him, Samson caught it in mid-air, his fingers digging into its mane. With a roar that rivaled the lion's own, Samson tore the animal apart as easily as other boys might tear a piece of bread. When it was over, Samson stood panting, looking down at his bloodied hands with a mixture of awe and horror. News of the incident spread through the village like wildfire. "He killed a lion with his bare hands," people exclaimed. "God's power is upon him," some whispered with reverence. "He's dangerous," others murmured fearfully. And Samson? Samson just wanted to understand who he was and why God had made him different. That night, as his mother washed the lion's blood from his hands, she repeated the words she had told him 1,000 times before. "You are a Nazirite, Samson. Set apart. Your strength comes from God, and it comes with responsibility." "But what if I don't want to be different?" Samson asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "What if I just want to be like everyone else?" His mother cupped his face in her hands. "God doesn't make mistakes, my son. Your strength has a purpose." What she didn't say, what she couldn't know, was how that strength would one day be tested by love, betrayed by trust, and ultimately redeemed in sacrifice. As Samson grew into a man, the villagers both feared and admired him. They called on him when the Philistines threatened their borders. They celebrated his victories. But they never truly accepted him as one of their own. And in that space between admiration and belonging, Samson's heart grew hungry for something he couldn't name. Hey! If you're enjoying this biblical journey so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the rest of this incredible story. Now, let's see what happens when Samson tries to find where he belongs. Years passed. Samson's legend grew along with his strength. By now, his uncut hair cascaded down his back like a dark waterfall, a visible reminder of his sacred vow. At 20 years old, he was judging disputes for his people, leading them in small skirmishes against their oppressors, the Philistines. Yet something restless stirred within him. One spring day, while visiting the Philistine town of Timnah, Samson saw her, a young Philistine woman whose beauty stopped him in his tracks. "Who is she?" he asked a passing merchant. "The daughter of one of our nobles," the man replied, eyeing Samson's Israelite clothing with suspicion. "Not for you, Hebrew." But Samson couldn't forget her face. The way she moved. The sound of her laughter carrying across the marketplace. When he returned home that evening, he announced to his parents, "I have seen a woman in Timnah, a daughter of the Philistines. Get her for me as my wife." His mother dropped the clay pot she was holding. It shattered on the floor, much like her hopes for her son. "A Philistine?" his father gasped. "Have you lost your mind? The Philistines are our enemies. They oppress our people." His mother knelt to gather the broken pieces of pottery, her hands trembling. "Is there not a woman among all our people that you must go to the uncircumcised Philistines for a wife?" But Samson's mind was made up. "She is the one I want," he said simply. "She is right in my eyes." What Samson didn't see was how his decision tore at his parents' hearts. How his mother wept in private, fearing what would come of such a union. How his father paced at night, wondering where they had gone wrong. And what his parents couldn't see was how Samson was tired of always being the outsider. Among his own people, he was set apart by his strength and his vow. Perhaps among the Philistines, with a Philistine wife, he might finally find a place where he could just be a man. The wedding was arranged despite his parents' objections. Heart had won over duty. But marriages between enemies are never simple. At the wedding feast, Samson was surrounded by 30 Philistine men. Companions assigned to him, though they were more like guards than friends. The atmosphere was tense. The wine flowed freely, though Samson didn't drink because of his vow. To break the ice, he proposed a riddle. "I'll give each of you a linen garment and a change of clothes if you can solve it," he challenged. "But if you can't, you each owe me the same." The Philistines, already disliking this Hebrew who had taken one of their women, agreed eagerly. Samson smiled. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. The riddle referred to the lion he had killed months earlier. After killing it, he had passed by the carcass later to find that bees had made a hive in it. He had scooped out honey, something sweet from the strong. For 3 days, the Philistines tried to solve the riddle, growing increasingly frustrated. On the 4th day, they approached Samson's new wife. "Get the answer from your husband," they threatened, "or we'll burn you and your father's house with fire. Did you invite us here just to rob us?" Terrified, she went to Samson in tears. "You don't love me," she sobbed. "You hate me. You've given my people a riddle, but haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even told my parents," Samson replied. "Why should I tell you?" But she wept before him for the rest of the week, wearing down his resolve. Finally, on the 7th day, he told her the answer, and she immediately told her people. Before sunset on the 7th day, the Philistines approached Samson with smug expressions. "What is sweeter than honey?" they said. "And what is stronger than a lion?" Samson's face darkened with anger. He knew immediately what had happened. If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Burning with rage, Samson went down to Ashkelon, another Philistine city, where he killed 30 men, took their garments, and gave them to those who had answered his riddle. Then, still seething with anger, he left his wife and returned to his father's house. What he didn't know was that his father-in-law, assuming Samson had abandoned his daughter, gave her to the best man at the wedding instead. When Samson returned later to visit his wife, he was met with shocking news. "I thought you hated her," his father-in-law explained nervously. "So I gave her to your companion. But look, her younger sister is more beautiful. Take her instead." This betrayal ignited a fury in Samson that would set in motion a cycle of violence that would last for decades. This time, Samson growled, "I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." He captured 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail in pairs, fastened a torch between each pair, and set the torches on fire. Then he let the foxes loose in the Philistines' grain fields, burning their crops, their vineyards, and their olive groves. When the Philistines discovered who was responsible, they took revenge by burning Samson's wife and her father to death. And so the cycle continued, violence breeding more violence, revenge spawning more revenge. Samson, the man caught between two worlds, now belonged to neither. Not fully Hebrew because of his foreign desires. Not accepted by the Philistines because of his Hebrew blood. Alone, he retreated to a cave in the rock of Etam, his heart hardened by loss, his soul scarred by betrayal. 20 years have passed. 20 years of skirmishes and battles. 20 years of Samson striking the Philistines hip and thigh, as the scriptures say. 20 years of living as a judge of Israel, yet always apart from his people. Samson was no longer the impulsive young man who had fallen for a Philistine woman. His beard was now flecked with gray. Lines creased the corners of his eyes. His massive shoulders, still powerful, now carried the weight of 2 decades of solitude. But his hair, his long, uncut hair, remained a visible symbol of his unbroken vow to God. One day, his wanderings took him to Gaza, a Philistine stronghold near the coast. There, in the bustling marketplace, he saw her. Delilah. Time seemed to slow as their eyes met across the crowd. She wasn't traditionally beautiful like his first wife had been. No, Delilah's beauty was different, sharper, more dangerous. Intelligence flashed in her dark eyes. Confidence showed in the way she haggled with merchants. Strength revealed itself in how other women made way for her. Samson was instantly captivated. What he couldn't know was that Delilah had noticed him long before he saw her. Everyone knew of Samson, the Hebrew judge with supernatural strength. The man who had killed 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. The man with the uncut hair. Delilah had her own struggles. Life hadn't been kind to her. Orphaned young, she had fought for everything she had, which wasn't much. Her small home at the edge of town barely kept out the rain. Her few possessions were worn and mended many times over. And now her younger brother was sick with a fever that wouldn't break, medicine too expensive for her meager earnings. "Excuse me," Samson said, approaching her stall where she sold woven goods. "These are beautifully made." Delilah looked up, pretending surprise at finding the famous Hebrew standing before her. "Thank you," she replied, her voice smooth as honey. "I weave them myself." Their conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years rather than minutes. By the time the market closed for the day, Samson had purchased 3 of her weavings at twice their value, and Delilah had acquired something potentially far more valuable, the interest of Samson. What Samson didn't see as he walked away was how 5 pairs of eyes watched their interaction from the shadows. 5 Philistine lords who had been waiting for just such an opportunity. They approached Delilah that evening as she closed her stall. "We saw you with the Hebrew," one said without preamble. Delilah stiffened. "I sell to many people. This was not just any person, another lord replied. This was Samson, our greatest enemy. The oldest of the lords stepped forward. We have a proposition for you, Delilah. A very lucrative proposition. Inside her humble home, with her brother coughing weakly on a pallet in the corner, the Philistine lords made their offer. 1,100 pieces of silver, the chief lord said. From each of us. Delilah's breath caught. 5,500 pieces of silver. It was more money than she could earn in a lifetime. What would I need to do, she asked, though she already knew the answer. Discover the secret of his great strength, the Lord replied. Find out how we can overpower him. Learn what makes him weak. Delilah looked at her brother, his face flushed with fever. With that kind of money, she could buy medicine. A better home. Security. I can't, she whispered. You can, the Lord insisted, placing a small pouch of silver on her table, a down payment. And you will. Or your brother's illness will be the least of your worries. After they left, Delilah sat in the darkness, the pouch of silver gleaming in the moonlight, its weight on her table nothing compared to the weight now on her conscience. Hey there. Isn't this story wild? If you're loving this biblical drama, don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps our channel. Now, let's see how Delilah's impossible choice plays out. As summer turned to autumn, Samson and Delilah's romance deepened. They met in secret places, a grove of olive trees outside the city, the quiet shore where waves lapped gently against the sand, her small home when darkness fell. For Samson, these moments were islands of peace in a lifetime of isolation. For the first time, he felt truly seen, not as a judge, not as a warrior, not as a man with supernatural strength, but simply as Samson. For Delilah, these same moments were torture. Each smile she gave him was laced with lies. Each kiss tasted of betrayal. Each tender word caught in her throat like a thorn. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars, Samson traced the curve of her cheek with his finger. Do you know, he whispered, the only thing that could ever truly defeat me is a woman like you. Delilah laughed, a sound like silver bells. But inside, her heart splintered. If only he knew how true his words might prove to be. The Philistine lords grew impatient. They wanted results. They wanted Samson powerless. They wanted their enemy brought low. And so, one night, as they lay together in her home, Delilah finally asked the question. Tell me, she said, keeping her voice casual, light. What is the secret of your great strength? How could someone tie you up and subdue you? Samson chuckled, seeing this as a lover's game. If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. The next day, Delilah procured 7 fresh bowstrings. And that night, when Samson slept deeply beside her, she bound him with them. Samson, she cried out. The Philistines are upon you. Samson woke instantly and snapped the bowstrings as easily as if they were threads. He had lied. Delilah pouted playfully, hiding her frustration. You've made a fool of me, Samson. You lied to me. Please, tell me how you can be bound. If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man, Samson replied, still treating it as a game. Another night, another test. New ropes this time. But again, when she cried out the warning, Samson snapped them easily. A third time she asked. A third time he lied, telling her if she wove the 7 braids of his hair into a loom and tightened it with a pin, he would lose his strength. She tried, and again he broke free effortlessly. Each failure increased the Philistine lord's anger. Each lie deepened Delilah's desperation. Meanwhile, her brother's condition worsened again. The medicine was running out. And the Philistine lords made it clear, no secret, no more silver. It had become more than a game. It had become a matter of survival. In the marketplace, Delilah noticed how people now looked at her differently. How they whispered behind their hands as she passed. Word had spread about her relationship with the Hebrew. She was caught between two worlds now, just as Samson had always been. "You look troubled," an old woman selling herbs observed one day. "I have much on my mind," Delilah admitted. The old woman nodded wisely. "The heart and the head rarely want the same thing, child. But remember, a moment's decision can echo through eternity." Those words haunted Delilah as she returned home, where Samson waited for her. As she looked at him, this powerful, gentle man who had opened his heart to her, she felt tears spring to her eyes. How had she come to this impossible choice? Love or survival? Loyalty to her people or loyalty to her heart? The game couldn't last forever. One night, Delilah's patience broke. Real tears streamed down her face as she confronted Samson. "How can you say you love me when your heart is closed to me?" she demanded. "3 times you've lied to me, Samson. 3 times. If you truly loved me, you would tell me the truth." Something in her desperation touched Samson's heart. Perhaps it was weariness from carrying his secret alone for so long. Perhaps it was the genuine emotion he saw in her eyes. Or perhaps, after a lifetime of isolation, he simply wanted to be fully known by someone. "My hair has never been cut," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have been a Nazirite set apart to God from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." In that moment, as the truth hung in the air between them, something shifted in Delilah's eyes. Relief? Triumph? Regret? Samson couldn't tell. What he did know was that for the first time in his life, he had shared his complete truth with another person. The burden of his secret, carried since childhood, now rested in Delilah's hands. "Thank you," she whispered, stroking his face tenderly. "For trusting me." That night, as Samson slept with his head on Delilah's lap, she made her choice. She glanced at her brother, sleeping fitfully in the corner, his breath still labored with fever. She thought of the Philistine lords and their threats. She remembered the weight of the silver in her hand. And she reached for the scissors. The moonlight gleamed on the metal as she raised it to Samson's hair. Her hand trembled. One cut. Then another. And another. With each snip, with each lock of hair that fell to the ground, Samson's power drained away. And with each lock, Delilah felt a piece of her own heart crumble. When the deed was done, she whispered, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke, confident in his strength as always. "I will go out as before and shake myself free," he thought. But this time was different. This time, when he tried to summon his strength, there was nothing. No surge of power. No divine connection. Just emptiness. Before he could process what was happening, soldiers flooded the room. They seized him. They bound him. And in his final moment of clarity before they took him away, his eyes met Delilah's. Was that regret he saw in her tear-filled eyes? Or just the cool satisfaction of a betrayal complete? The Philistine soldiers dragged Samson from Delilah's house in chains, chains that once would have snapped like thread in his hands but now held him fast. As for Delilah, she stood in her doorway, the promised silver now piled on her table, watching as they took away the man she had betrayed. The weight of the coins was nothing compared to the weight of what she had done. They blinded him first. Hot irons against his eyes, and then, darkness. Forever. The mighty Samson, who had once struck fear into the hearts of thousands, now stumbled blindly through a world of perpetual night. They shackled him next. Iron chains that once he could have snapped like twigs now held him fast, cutting into his wrists, a constant reminder of his powerlessness. They mocked him always. The mighty judge of Israel, reduced to pushing a grinding wheel like an ox, walking in endless circles, grinding grain for his captor's bread. "Sing for us, Hebrew," they would demand, poking him with sticks, throwing scraps of food at him as if he were an animal in a cage. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. And all the while, his hair began to grow again. In Gaza, Delilah lived in a fine house now, purchased with her blood money. But the luxury brought her no joy. Food turned to ash in her mouth. Wine tasted bitter. Sleep came rarely, and when it did, it was filled with nightmares of Samson's accusing eyes. Some said she had been paid her silver but lived in torment. Some claimed she had tried to visit him once in his prison, but he had turned away, unable to bear her presence. Others insisted she had vanished with her blood money, never looking back. Samson couldn't know the truth. All he knew was darkness, pain, and the slow return of something stirring within him, something like hope. In his blindness, Samson began to see things he had never seen before. In his weakness, he found a different kind of strength. In his humiliation, he discovered humility. "God," he would whisper in the dead of night, when the prison was quiet except for the skittering of rats, "I never understood what it meant to depend on you until now. I thought the strength was mine. I see now. It was always yours." His prayers, once proud declarations of his own might, became humble requests for forgiveness. For guidance. For one last chance to serve the God he had so often taken for granted. And as his hair grew longer, something else grew within him, a plan. The day of the great festival arrived. All across Gaza, people prepared for the celebration. Thousands of Philistines would gather in their great temple to honor their god Dagon and to celebrate their victory over Samson, the Hebrew who had terrorized them for decades. In his prison cell, Samson heard the preparations. The excited voices. The sounds of music beginning in the distance. "Today is the day," a guard announced, entering Samson's cell. "Today, you entertain the lords of the Philistines." They led him out, blind, chained, his hair now long and thick again. They paraded him through the streets, where people jeered and threw stones. "Look at the mighty Samson now," they mocked. "Not so strong without your God, are you, Hebrew?" At the temple, the celebration was already in full swing. Wine flowed freely. Music filled the air. 3,000 people packed the building, nobles and commoners alike, all gathered on the roof and in the main hall to witness the humiliation of their greatest enemy. "Bring out Samson," they shouted. "Let him perform for us." A young boy was assigned to lead the blind man to the center of the temple. "Place me between the pillars," Samson told the young servant guiding him. "Let me feel them. Let me rest against them." The boy did as he asked, not understanding the significance. There, between the massive columns that supported the entire temple, Samson stood still. For the first time in months, he lifted his face toward heaven. "Lord God," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the crowd's jeers, "please remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more." His hands reached out, feeling for the pillars, one to his left, one to his right. "Let me die with the Philistines," he prayed. With all his might, with every ounce of strength returned to him, Samson pushed. At first, nothing happened. The crowd continued their mockery, unaware of the drama unfolding before them. Then, a crack. Small at first. Then larger. The pillars shifted. The temple shuddered. Someone screamed. Then everyone screamed. With a roar like thunder, the entire structure collapsed. In that final act of sacrifice and vengeance, Samson killed more in his death than he had killed in his life. 3,000 Philistines, including all their rulers, died with him that day. And somewhere in Gaza, a woman named Delilah heard the distant sound of destruction. She felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. And she knew, without being told, what had happened. The silver coins on her table seemed to mock her now. The fine house felt like a prison. The brother she had saved watched her from across the room, his eyes full of questions she could never answer. And so ends the story of Samson and Delilah, a tale as old as time yet as fresh as yesterday's heartbreak. It's not just ancient history. It's every choice we've ever made between love and duty. It's every betrayal that began with good intentions. It's every strength that became a weakness when placed in the wrong hands. The story of Samson and Delilah reminds us that our greatest gifts can become our greatest vulnerabilities when we forget where they come from. It shows us how one moment of weakness can change everything. It teaches us that trust, once broken, exacts a terrible price. But perhaps most importantly, it whispers to us that even after our greatest failures, even after betrayal, loss, and humiliation, redemption is possible. Samson found his way back to God in the darkness of his prison. His final act was both his most selfless and his most powerful. And Delilah? The Bible doesn't tell us what happened to her after Samson's death. Perhaps she found her own redemption. Perhaps she lived with her regret. Perhaps she, too, discovered that silver is cold comfort when purchased with a broken heart. Their story echoes through the centuries because it touches something universal in all of us, the tension between strength and vulnerability, the battle between desire and duty, the search for belonging in a world that often makes us choose between who we are and who others want us to be. This has been the incredible story of Samson and Delilah. If this tale of strength, betrayal, and redemption moved you, please take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another biblical story brought to life. Was Delilah truly villainous, or was she a victim of impossible circumstances? Was Samson a hero or a cautionary tale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want more epic biblical stories like this one, let me know which character you want to hear about next.